Hello again. So I'm going to do another video. This is a Tuesday evening, 7 o'clock. On the bus home, I was watching some videos about Destiny, the new raid and stuff, and I saw a few snaps of sort of assets in the game that I saw. Those might be really interesting to make. And one of them is this. It's kind of like a very Grecian or Egyptian sort of pillar, kind of like a very ornate teardrop. Lots of this gold filigree and this gold base might be very cool to make. And these, I can't find a good enough picture of either of these, like a full standing, or of these. I quite like these. These are almost like ornate braziers. So it's like almost like a chamfered or a beveled cube base with this kind of basin on top of it. That again might be very cool to make. So what I'm going to do is choose one, which I'm probably going to do the pillar first, and make it. And before I do kick off, I'm going to break down, or I'm going to kind of highlight the polygons that I see in this image. So if I come in with my trusty brush, the polygons that I'm seeing like that. So there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 from this kind of line going around here. There's 5 going down, and there's much more going actually around the radius. So we're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it might be upwards of maybe about 50 divisions going round to kind of get that really ornate, a really smooth kind of geometry going round. So I'm not going to go for a 50 or like as high a resolution or higher density as that, but I'm definitely going to try and get something very similar to this, like a very big, tall, marble-esque, gold filigreed, gold inlaid, so very opulent object. You can see here it's been used in a couple of different ways. It's been kit bashed, or at least bashed into the wall here, and this is a freestanding one. And I might also make these. These look a lot simpler. Well, I say they look a lot simpler. I guarantee the more I go into them, and the more I break them up, I'll put a different colour on that, the more I'll kind of like discover, oh, you know what, that's more than I thought. And this is something that I would totally advise you to do is, make something from reference like this and just break it up, see what shapes you can find inside the image. So I'm seeing shapes here, and I would be thinking, right, using these as geometric breaks. Like, not geometric breaks, but key geometric forms. So yeah, let's get kicking off with our little column here. So what I'm not going to do this time is actually put this on the screen while I'm modeling it, because I think to really get the idea of what I want to do, I'm actually going to embed this on my other monitor so I can have a nice big high resolution image and it's not going to get in the way of my actual scene. So you're going to have to kind of bear with me kind of having it off screen for a bit. So first off, new project. Let's move this to my desktop, seeing as I've not got my hard drive plugged in at the minute. So it's desktop. I'm going to call this Destiny Leviathan. I'm probably spelled that wrong. Column, because this came from the new Leviathan Raid, or pillar column, however you want to say it. Right, so yeah, so I've only got this. I'll just bring it back for a sec. I've only got this one image, and that's as tall as it gets. So I've kind of got to get an idea of how tall this is, and I think from the video, I think these are pretty tall. They're kind of very tall and ornate, and I'm going to kind of decide and make my own topper to this. So you can see here at the bottom, we've got this very kind of nice curly, spherical, cylindrical forms down here with all this nice inlay, which was definitely a normal map with all this nice inlay here. So I'm definitely aim for something like that up the top. So off we go. Let's just type that on here again. Right. So, also looking at this, I'll bring it back again. What I'm probably going to do is actually start off with a sphere, because I'm looking at the very bottom of this, and though this whole column is tall, it is a very cylindrical shape. A key form inside this is at the very bottom. Is this shape going around? I've got a rubbish colour there. Let me get a better colour to show you that. Nice red. Oop. There we go. Is this shape coming round like this, going under, and up like that? Pardon my terrible. There we go. So it's round and up like that. So I'm actually going to make a sphere and start off from the bottom and go up, because then I can very easily make the length of the pillar and then decide how much of a curve, how much of an actual sort of curve like that I want to my object, on my object. So once again, I'll move it off screen for the third and final time. Once it wants to let go, there we go. Right. So make my sphere. I'm gonna leave this as a 20. So this is going to be pretty, in my world, this is going to be pretty high poly. Again, make sure it's in the middle of the world. I'm not bothered about the y-axis because I'm going to change this. I'll tell you what though, before I actually start anything, the grid that I'm looking at here on the floor, each one of these individual squares is a centimetre. In the standard Maya default, every one of these squares is a centimetre, and I kind of want to model this to scale. And looking at this image, this is probably about 10 foot in diameter. So what I'm going to do is actually change the units that I'm working on here. So I'm not going to change how many, it's not like I'm going to get a massive amount of squares. I'm going to change each individual square to be a foot. So, right. So the way I do that is by going up to Windows, Settings and Preferences, Settings and Preferences and Preferences. So then I get this window up here. And these are all I can like change lots of different settings within the software and change some colors. But what I want to do is go to Settings, and then I'm given this window, and where we've got this working units, we've got linear, angular, and time. Angular is just basically like degrees in my rotations. Time is what is represented down here in the timeline, and linear is basically my unit distance. So I'm going to change that from centimetre to foot. So we've got here millimetre, centimetre, metre, inch, foot, yard. Don't ring my phone. Right, sorry about that. Someone ringing my phone. So yeah, I'm going to change this to foot. So when I click this, you're going to see that the background gets bigger. So I'm going to save that, and then so now each one of these squares is representative of a foot. So I'm going to make this a 10 by 10. So basically, I'm going to make a sphere which will fit inside this green square in the middle. I'll change this so it's a little bit easier to see. So I make my sphere. Again, I'm going to make it 20 by 20. I'm just going to leave it as a standard. And I'm going to make the radius 5. So that should actually fit inside my world, which it does. Cool. So that's fitting inside my area. So now what I'm going to do is basically cut off the section that I don't need, this upper section, and because it's going to be connecting to a point at the bottom, I'm going to cut that off. Maybe even cut that bit off, like that. Yeah, because it's not so deep, but it is quite girthy. Alright. And again, so I'm just looking at the design, and by the time it gets to this point at the top, it's starting to... Oh, I've got something turned on. I've got edge constraint turned on. Yeah, I've got edge constraint turned on. Turn it off. So by the time it gets to the very top, before it gets into like the main kind of length of the pillar, it's starting to get quite steep on that angle. So I'm just gonna help it along like that. Cool. Right then, so now it's time for me just to extrude and just take it up to the top, because I can later on I can decide if I want to make this a little bit more bulgy, or whatever. You know, I can mess with it because it's still quite low poly enough that I can do some real kind of changes to later on. But for now, I'm going to decide how tall I want to make this. And you might have heard me talk about this in class, but I'm going to what I call make a journey. I'm just going to go from the beginning point there. I'm going to extrude to the very end of how, you know, the very end of the height. So how tall do I want to make this? I'm not going to go extrude and extrude and extrude and kind of gradually kind of move myself up. I'm going to extrude. I'm going to move it all the way up. So I want this to be quite tall and ornate. So like that, and I can bring it in like that. Nice, good, nice, good. So from there, I can then start adding my divisions to start getting the curve. And just like before, I'm going to add one in the center. And then I'm going to add one at the top and one at the bottom. And gradually just start to shape it as I go along. So all these divisions that I'm adding are very regular. Oops. I'm just being very careful about how curvy something is. So if I make a new edge and I make a change to how much of a indentation there is, I'm trying to be aware as much as possible on how that is then affecting the vertex, or the flow of the object going up and the flow of the object going down. So it's looking okay. So now I'm going to add one more. Actually, what I can do is I can add edges in another way, but by adding it in this other way, I'm able to do something called add edge flow, which is basically as I add an edge here, across here, it's going to give myself a slight bend as the angle is changing as it goes up. You're going to see what I mean. So I'm going to select all these edges. I'm going to go to edit mesh and then to connect, but I'm going to go to the option box and I'm going to make sure that insert edge flow is turned on, and when we hit apply, it might only be subtle, but look around this middle area here. See how it kind of like bows out a little bit. Oops. Back. There we go. So I'm going to go to edit mesh again, connect. There we go. So as I'm moving along, oops, it's giving me a slightly more smoother edge to my object. Now, if I actually soften the normals, that's not looking just how I want it. So I'll just Z back until I've only got take away. So take all these edges I've just added in, then take them away. I know it's like I'm just losing a lot of work, but it's fine. I'm gonna add that edge in again, like that. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna use a soft select to scale it out a bit, to kind of give myself a little bit more bend, you know, try and push this ornateness of the object a little bit more. And the same up here. So I'm not just grabbing the center here, I'm going to grab, because I don't want any of this y-axis to come into play, so I'm just going to grab the y-axis kind of the green square and just move it about a little bit. That's a bit nicer now. So let's see what it looks like when I start adding these edges in again. There we go. That's a bit better. So let's have a look at my reference. I'm just having a look at my reference off screen again. This is why having reference is good, because I can see where I've actually gone wrong. The curve here should be much shallower. So let's just try and use what we've got so far. Okay. And again, this is why it's good to keep stuff low poly and as controllable as we can, because if we need to make any changes, it's really easy to do so. And I think just with those little tiny tweaks, I've actually sussed it. Oops. Yeah, just with that little tiny movement of vertex, that's looking a lot nicer to me now. So, soften that normal so it looks a bit nicer. There we go. Maybe just bring that out a little bit more. There we go. Perfect. Well, not perfect, but if I was doing this for actual client work, I'd probably spend a lot longer on it. Because I can see a few things that are kind of sticking out to me that I would absolutely just want to fix. I can see slight bumps in the actual geometry, but because this is a quick build, I'm going to not worry too much about it, because I just want to get the end product really to show you how simple it is to make these objects. So I've got the main kind of like shaft of my column. I'm not going to worry about putting any of the really ornate tiny little indentations. All this filigree as well, all this gold is going to come in texture. So again, I'm not worried about putting any of that detail in. I'm just looking for the very basic geometric shape. So now what I'm going to do is make the base, and this looks very easy because this can just be extrude. You know, this can just be a bunch of extrusions to play with. Okay, so I'm going to leave my grid turned off, so I don't have to worry about anything, because I'll move it to fit it onto the grid when I'm done. Okay, so let's get moving. So I'm going to extrude out and just bring it down a little bit to create this first like lip, which is quite steep actually, and then bring it down. So I'm paying very close attention to what my reference is telling me to do. Bring it down. And bring it in. Bring it down. So you see there, I'm extruding, but I'm not going back up here, because again, like I've said in a few videos and in class, the last tool I used was the extrusion. So if I just press G for gamma, that's going to repeat that last tool. And it's a really quick way of just working out. So just like with the candle video, I'm just getting very flat shapes, because again, looking at my reference, I can see, especially in this area here, there's a curve. There's a slight sort of like almost like a bit of a curve in there. Same with down here. There's a slight curve here that I'm going to add in, but right now I'm not bothered about that. There's some slight stepping inside this area. Yeah. Down. Out. Down again. Cool. So even without those curves, that's looking pretty nice. You can quite an opulent little thing. So I'm going to actually move this, bring my grid back, and you can see here it's kind of sitting through the grid, which I don't want. So I'm going to D and V this so it snaps to the very bottom of my geometry, and then just X to snap to grid to move it so it snaps there. So there you go, sitting nicely on the grid. Let's soften those normals. There we go. And I can turn on the ambient space, the screen space ambient occlusion. You can see there it's got a little bit darker in those crevices. That just gives me a nice, that kind of helps me visualize stuff a little bit more. Now what I am going to add in is this little rim here. I'm going to add that in. So bring on the geometry, and it's just it's about in this area here. So I'm going to add an edge in, and actually I've noticed something about this. It's not a complete, it's not a completely flat surface geometrically. There's a slight little, this, oh, it's almost like a dish that it sits in. There's a slight little bump here. So it comes up, it comes up, then in, then up, like that. So I'm going to make this little ridge there. So I'm going to add another edge. So I've just added this edge in here. So what I'm going to do is add another edge across here. And just use the slide to move it down a little bit. And then just bring this out. And bring this one out a little bit. Just to give a slight ridge. Just there, that's enough. Now what I could do as well, which I'm going to do because I'm feeling a little bit spicy with it, is I'm going to put one more edge in there, and maybe bring that up a bit. So redo that and use the slide just to raise it up a little bit. I'm going to push this in. I'm just going to extrude this in a tiny bit, just give myself a little bit of a ridge. So use that thickness, bring it in a tiny bit. Use that offset to actually bring it back together like that. Ah, nice. So that's just giving me, maybe it's a bit too big. I should actually just bring that down a little bit more. And like that. Because quite often, something that I do is when I'm trying to add this, something I find myself doing quite a lot, is that I'm trying to add this small detail. I might make the detail just a little bit too big, where it's this, it's that fine detail. So, right, so I'm now going, I've added this nice little detail in here. I'm going to go back to my base, and I'm going to add a little bit of bend, a little bit of a curvature to these areas here. And I'm going to see what that connect tool I used before can do for me. So edit mesh, connect, and it didn't really do it too well. So I can just use a normal tool, bring myself to, and again using that little square here, or holding control and grabbing the y-axis, because that'll ignore the y-axis. I can just give it a bit of curvature like that, just to make it look like it's just curving in a little bit. Maybe even add 3 instead of, there we go, add 3 instead. Oops. And bring that one down and out a little bit. Yeah. So see where the other one is. I'm looking back at my reference now. So then it comes down. This could actually be a little bit deeper. I made that a little bit too small. Bring that deeper a bit. Okay, so I'm seeing some minute detail I could probably get in there and actually do it with geometry. So I'm going to add, again, just doing the same thing I've just done here, but on here with 2 edges, using that scale tool, just to give myself a little bit of a bump. Move it up. That's good. Now around this area here on my reference, I can either get that through normal map, or I can just do a little bit of geometry inside there. So bear with us while I experiment a little bit. So I'm going to do this, slide that up, like that, and then I'm going to do another one. I'm going to move it up and scale it out a tiny bit. Bring that down. So you have a little tiny ridge like that. So that's my eyes catching these sort of minute details. This needs to come down a little bit. Yeah, like that. Because I'm going to put a slight curve in this section as well. But I'm seeing also an indentation just as this angle changes around here. I'm seeing a lot of slight indentation. So once again, using that curve tool, using the slide to bring it down to the bottom. Like that. And I'm just going to bring that thickness in. Tiny bit, then bring the offset, not division, bring the offset in, just so it closes a little bit. Maybe bring the thickness in a little bit more, make more of a point of that. There we go. And I'm actually going to, again, one more. Right there, I'm actually going to extrude this face out a little bit. Move it down, move it up like that. Again, it's just give me like just give myself a little bit more kind of shape to my surface. So I'm going to give myself the same thing I've done here and here. I'm going to give myself a slight curve here. Now, I think I don't need to really kind of say it, but obviously the dudes and girls who worked on Destiny had a long time to develop these. I'm trying to do these in like a quick build. So what I'm doing here isn't probably the best representation of how I mean, I'd love to see the wireframe of this. I'd love to see the actual workflow of how they created these assets, just to see how how these amazing people actually do it. But I'm just trying to get this shape that I've seen and do a sketch, if you will, of the object. So what I'm doing here, I can also bring the reference back. I'm seeing a little lip, so it's almost like an alabaster or a marble ringlet here, and then just underneath there's a little ledge, and then you've got like the very bottom of the base. So I'm going to give myself this little ridge here, this little lip. So look at that. So it's a lot of adding singular edges, moving them into place. Scale that out a little bit. Bring that up. So now I can, this little small face group here, I can just move that in, bring in the offset a little bit so it's not as quite as a hard angle like that. Good. And I'm going to bring this down a tiny bit. Now this edge I've just got selected here, I'm also going to bevel it so I can get a bit more of a curve and add a segment, maybe up to the fraction and up the thing. There we go. And I'm probably going to say that's done, because I can go in there and start adding a lot of other detail and really start faffing and faffing and faffing. And I don't want to do that because I spent enough time at the bottom and it looks pretty good. Actually, the only thing I probably would do is, and this will help me more in texturing than it will in modeling, where you've got this inlay here where it kind of looks like obsidian and gold, I'm actually going to create a slight indentation there, and it might not be very perceptible in the model, but when we're unwrapping this it'll be quite handy. So I'm going to segment this off and just pinch this outwards so they're quite far apart, and then just grab these faces and extrude them in slightly and then offset them in slightly like that. And because I'm being a fuff, I will just bevel that. Cool. Cool, so that's me done with the base. The last thing I should do now is Soften those edges. So I'm keeping it soft. I'm going to go around and harden all those edges later on because I'm still got the top to do. Now, I'm going to do a save because I realised I've not saved through this whole thing. Pillar 1 is I've kind of got to think about how this will be topped. So I can either have really ornate rollers. I have to get some reference up while I'm doing this. Pillars. So obviously we know pillars generally by kind of like a more Romanic or Grecian sort of setup. So you got ones here where they've got like the rollers at the very top. You got here where they've just kind of very much a carbon copy of what's at the bottom. Again with the rollers, that's a very, very ornate. So if I was going for something very opulent like I'm doing here, I could go for this kind of curly geometry. Or if I was feeling very, very fancy, I could do something like this. This would take me a long time to do, and I would prefer to do something like this, very kind of like swirly, almost floral pattern. But for this video, I've not got the time. And probably what I'm going to do, just to keep it easy, I'm going to do something like this, just as a variation from what is already at the bottom of mine. So I'm going to probably do 2 or 3 rolls with some straight edges, and then what I'm also visualizing is when I'm texturing this, actually having like a transparency map which will just kind of like fade it off so it kind of disappears into an obscurity. Just gonna, I'm still faffing, always faffing. No, that's not done it, that's ruined it. Cool, so let's get a topper on this. So yeah, like I said, I'm gonna freehand this, which is a bit risky, but I'm gonna freehand it. So I'm gonna bring it up and bring it in, then bring it out. Then bring it up, bring it out. But I'm going to make I'm going to turn this shape I'm just making here using the bevel tool. I'm going to make that into a soft shape. So it's made like a little indentation there that I can just move it up, move it out. So a lot of the same stuff. So now I'm fluting it out. I'm widening this shape at the very top. Not a whole lot, but just enough. Because what I can also do with this is I can decide whether it's very clean or very old, and I can have, if it's very old, I can have some really grimy stuff like the collection of moisture that would kind of like turn into like an oxidated sort of green that might kind of like bring some like dripping grime or something. Or I could just have this be really nice and fresh and clean. So yeah, like I said, I'm freehanding this and I'm really not kind of thinking too much about it. I'm just trying to kind of use my own little visual language to kind of make it work. So I'm going to bring this out, bring this up, and then bring this up. So that's where I would probably blend it off using a transparency map. I'm just going to see about just chilling it out a little bit because it's very wide. So maybe if I do something like that. See, it's the problem with freehanding stuff. Sometimes you get carried away, and when you kind of stand back, it doesn't quite work. In fact, yes, I will delete a lot of this upper section, as it's the upper section, and I'm just going to be kind of get rid of it anyway. So I'm just going to take it down to there. So this is where I'm going to take it, and I'm just going to raise this section up slightly. Like that. Boom. So that's how I'm going to take it. So let's go in, and so I've got a lot of straight edges here that I want to just bevel. So I'll bevel these two with a segment. Bevel this edge with a segment. And in fact, maybe I do a, ooh, yeah. Yeah, so I've used that depth here to move that in instead, which has kind of pleased me greatly. Nice. So I'm going to leave that section. I'm going to rush over this section, just leave it, because again, it's at the very top, and I'm more concerned with down here. So just the patterns that will be going along this area and this area here. So what I'm going to do is just not talk for a bit and just go around and smooth the normals and make any like minor changes, but geometrically it's done. The only thing I'll probably end up doing on this one is giving it a flooring just so it's got something to stand on. So yeah, silent video time.